Questions.
Oral questions! Questions online! Honorable Leader of the Opposition, CNDP next Congress again, Pierre Poilievre!
Conservatives would have liked to be working today to counter the doubling of housing costs this Prime Minister has caused, or the record food price inflation, which has been 36% higher in Canada than in the US. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister has paralyzed Parliament by refusing your ruling directing his government to turn over evidence in the $400 million green slush fund scandal that the Auditor General says involves 186 conflicts of interest, with the chair of the fund found guilty. What has he got to hide?
$400 million green slush fund for starters.
The House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is not being truthful with Canadians. It is the RCMP Commissioner himself who said the RCMP's ability to receive and use information obtained through this production order and under the compulsory powers afforded by the Auditor General Act in the course of a criminal investigation could give rise to concerns under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It is therefore highly unlikely that any information obtained by the RCMP under the motion where privacy interests exist could be used to support a criminal prosecution or further a criminal investigation. Mr. Speaker, let's get
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is a $400 million scandal involving Liberal appointees giving millions of dollars to their own companies, and the minister's story is now changing. Last week, she claimed that the government had given documents to the RCMP. This week, they claim that if they gave documents to the RCMP, it would cause the Charter of Rights to come crashing down. It sounds like there's a new story every week to justify paralyzing Parliament to cover up the truth. What is in these documents about this $400 million scandal that the Prime Minister is so afraid of?
The Honourable Leader of the...
There you go. Put some W's for that.
This is a typical witch hunt from the Leader of the Opposition to go after people who have nothing to do with this. These are files such as personnel files that contain private information of individuals who have nothing to do with what is going on. Mr. Speaker, it is the RCMP and the Auditor General themselves who raised concerns with this motion, and it is the government's view that we should send this to committee so that we can get on with the important work of this House and protect the rights of Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
A witch hunt. The Ethics Commissioner appointed by this government has found the chair of the fund in violation of the law. The Auditor General, also appointed by this government, says there were 186 conflicts of interest involving Liberal appointees giving millions of dollars to their own companies. $400 million. Potential criminality, according to the main whistleblower in the scandal. Any other employer would voluntarily turn over all the evidence to the police if it had been ripped off by its own staff. What is the Prime Minister hiding?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, if and when the police request that information, it will obviously be handed over because that is proper judicial process.
Oh my goodness.
Parliament that is...
They're just freaking covering their tracks.
Canadians should be concerned, Mr. Speaker, because when he is going after the rights of other Canadians, it's only a matter of time before his political vendettas come after the rights of all Canadians.
You won't believe.
Oh, there he is.
Corporate landlords are using AI technology to rip off renters. They're jacking up rent. Now, the United States is taking legal action against this, but the Liberals are letting it happen here in Canada. Now, I know the Conservatives don't care because their chief advisor is also a chief lobbyist for corporate landlords. But what's the Liberals' excuse?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for his question and his concern for the rising cost of rent, which I completely agree is a very serious issue. Where we differ is we're not satisfied with just launching complaints on the floor of the House of Commons. We want to advance policies that actually put solutions on the table that make a meaningful difference for families. That's why we're putting measures in place to help build more homes, like cutting taxes on apartment construction. Is why we're increasing investments to build more affordable housing.
Didn't this guy lose 1 million people?
Bill of Rights on the table to help protect renters in precarious situations. I only wish the NDP would care enough to join us in trying to do something about the problem.
Then I have Deputy de Burnaby.
The Honourable Member of Burnaby South.
Excuses are way cheaper than rent.
He's been waiting for weeks to say that one.
Nation has had undrinkable water since 2018. And this Liberal government is fighting them in court, arguing that they do not have a legal responsibility to clean the water. They're also arguing that when a minister says...
I rarely agree with anything Jagmeet says, but this is true.
...to believe that they're actually going to do. Will the Liberals call off the lawyers and clean up the water?
I cannot believe that I actually agree with something Jagmeet is saying.
Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we've been doing over the last 9 years, cleaning up the mess that the Conservatives left behind with over $8 million
that's not true.
in clean water.
Liberal government lawyers
Across the country, Mr.
ruled
Speaker,
that it's not the government's responsibility to clean, to make sure that people in Canada have clean drinking water.
We'll be testifying tomorrow about the legislation. There are hundreds of chiefs that have called on the NDP and the Conservatives to get this legislation moving through the House, so we never go back to that time again.
Fuck! Yes, it's a rare W for Jagmeet.
The honourable member from New West.
But don't put it in chat. Don't you dare.
So I'm going to ask him to please not take the mic unless recognized. The honourable member from Haldimand, Norfolk.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and now time is up. Mr. Speaker, you ruled that the government has violated the House order to turn over evidence to the RCMP related to the $400 million green slush fund scandal. Yet, the Liberal government continues to obstruct justice by refusing to turn over these documents. When will they end this cover-up and let the House focus on solving the housing, food, and inflation crisis that they created?
The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
She's finally getting some camera time, eh?
What the member opposite is saying is absolutely false. It is the Conservatives who are filibustering their own motion in this House because it is the RCMP and the Auditor General who have both raised their extreme discomfort with the motion that the Conservatives have put forward. If the Conservatives want to get back to work, we are ready to send this to committee to make sure that we can talk about the issues that matter to Canadians. That's what Liberals are here to do. We don't understand why Conservatives don't want to do that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Haldimand, Norfolk.
The truth is, it is the Liberal government that is obstructing justice and holding Parliament in contempt by refusing to hand over documents to the RCMP. Now we know why. The Auditor General has found that the Liberal-appointed board members gave nearly $400 million to their own companies. This is happening at a time when Canadians can barely afford food to eat and poverty diseases like scurvy have resurfaced in this country. Will the NDP Liberals take accountability and just hand over those documents to the Canadians?
There you go.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker,
they're bouncing around. Who answers?
Conservatives talk about obstructing justice. Let's just talk about how justice works in this country. When law enforcement wants to prosecute an individual, they...
Colleagues, I'm going to invite the Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General to start from the top.
Mr. Speaker, 3 times in this question period so far, I've heard Conservatives talk about obstructing justice. Let's talk about how justice actually operates in a democracy. Law enforcement has a reasonable suspicion about an individual or an entity. They then go and seek a search warrant from a court so that they can invade that person's privacy and obtain the documents. Instead of pursuing the normal court processes, we have Conservatives saying we're going to subvert all of that for the purposes of partisan gain. This is what we do in a democracy. We stand up for judicial processes and we stand up for the Charter.
No, they keep blocking every time it goes to committee. They have no other choice.
I'm not able to hear all comments, but I did hear the comments from the member from Glengarry Prescott Russell asking not to take the microphone until he's recognized by the speaker. The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
Taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up, and corruption is off the charts. A fish rots from the head down. So is it any wonder that Liberal cronies appointed to the Green Slush Fund by a Prime Minister twice convicted of ethics violations engaged in corruption? And this is not small corruption, Mr. Speaker. It's $400 million. And Mr. Speaker, you ordered the production of these documents.
Yeah.
Why won't these Liberals stop the cover-up and produce them?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it's...
No, the chihuahua with the fake enthusiasm.
Slogans are up, Mr. Speaker. Slogans are up again. Canadians are sick and tired of them, Mr. Speaker, repeating the same false things, Mr. Speaker, and repeating the same slogan. What these Conservatives are about, Mr. Speaker, is going after the personal file of employees and former employees. They're targeting STDC today. Who are they going to target tomorrow? That's what on this side that I have. We stand for democracy. We'll stand for rights. We'll stand up for Canada.
Yeah, right. You've had 9 years. All-time low in the polls.
The honourable member from Dufferin.
Scandal after scandal.
Very simple who we're targeting, Mr. Speaker. We're targeting corruption, corruption that they enabled, corruption that they're hiding, and corruption that they refuse to produce the documents for. Mr. Speaker, these are documents that you ordered the production of. So Canadians should ask themselves, why aren't they producing them? They're not producing them because they are so damaging. They are so bad. They will destroy this government, and therefore they've used up 7 days of House of Commons time to hide their corruption. Stop the corruption. Produce the documents.
Right. There you go. Stop messing around.
Colleagues, the Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Speaker, again, the Conservatives are saying things that are false. The only party that has been putting up speakers for the past week are the Conservatives. So they are the ones that are filibustering their own motion. But let's talk about why they might be filibustering that motion. Rob Walsh, the former law clerk, said, in my humble opinion, it is an abuse of its powers for the House to use its power to demand a...
Chers colleagues, it is so important for us to allow one speaker to speak at a time because we have a very large place here with many members. It's difficult for those who require the use of their earphones to be able to hear the interpretation. So the Honourable Government...
There he goes.
I'm going to ask her to...
At least he's not muting the mic.
I know that I've got some hand signals from members who were not able to hear that answer. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I notice the volume gets up when they don't want to hear the truth. So let's go back to that. The only members of Parliament who have been debating this motion are Conservative members of Parliament. They are filibustering their own motion. And let me tell you why, Mr. Speaker. It might have something to do with Rob Walsh, the former law clerk, who stated, it is an abuse of its powers for the House to use its power to demand and get documents from the government in order to transfer them to a third party that wouldn't otherwise receive them, or to compel the government to give documents to the third party. They want to get around the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They're going after Canadians. Who's next?
PFLP is a listed terrorist entity. Fact 2. Khaled Barakat was a member of PFLP when he founded Sammy Doon in 2012, and his wife Charlotte Cates incorporated Sammy Doon under Canadian law in 2021. Fact 3. Under Section 8305 of the Criminal Code, any entity that has knowingly acted on behalf of at the direction of or in association with a listed entity can be listed. The facts are clear. The government's position is not. Why hasn't the government listed Sammy Doon as a terrorist entity under the criminal code?
The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Speaker, the government's position has in fact been very clear. Decisions around listing terrorist entities are made based on the advice of security and intelligence officials. My colleague, the Parliamentary Secretary, made it clear yesterday. I have instructed the security and intelligence agencies that report to us to do on an expedited basis a review of these matters. And I've said, Mr. Speaker, we hope to come back to Canadians with information very soon.
Mr. Speaker, the government has all sorts of excuses why it won't provide documents to this House or to the RCMP about the $400 million spending scandal. They falsely claim it would violate privacy and that it would negatively impact the RCMP's investigation and that it would violate charter rights. The Constitution is clear. Parliament is supreme. Parliament has the lawful authority to order the production of documents. So why is this government consistently trampling on the constitutional authority of this House?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that was some incredible doublespeak from my colleague across the way. It's actually the RCMP who has said this, and I quote, "The RCMP's ability to receive and use information obtained through this production order and under the compulsory powers afforded by the Auditor General Act in the course of a criminal investigation could give rise to concerns under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There is significant risk that the motion could be interpreted as a circumvention
She has to read her notes, eh?
processes and charter protections. For a party that claims to respect the police, they certainly don't respect police independence."
Exactement.
The Honourable Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms also includes Sections 3, Sections 4, and Sections 5, which is about the democratic rights of Canadians. And Canadians have the right to be democratically elected on the floor of this House, and the majority of this House has demanded the production of these documents related to the $400 million spending scandal. We did the same thing with lab documents. Why does this government consistently ignore the democratic wishes of the people's elected representatives and deny this House?
There we go. We got some W's in the chat for that one. Look at that, folks.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney
Speaker, I
General.
have a lot of respect for that member opposite because he usually stands up for institutions, including this place. What he's not standing up for right now is for the independence of law enforcement in this country. The independence of law enforcement is pivotal. And what my colleague was emphasizing is that usually my friends opposite are constantly listening to the police. This is what the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP said on the news yesterday. It's a very dangerous situation. The rule of law is predicated upon a separation between what Parliament is doing and what law enforcement agencies are doing. In this case, the RCMP. We're listening to those RCMP commissioners and former commissioners. I wish the member opposite would do the same.
The Liberals are just greasy, man.
Calgary Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, for years they've known Sammy Doon as a known terror affiliate. On October 7th, they chanted, "We are Hezbollah, we are Hamas, death to Canada, death to America, death to Israel." They incited hate, they incited terror, they burned our flag. Why does our foreign minister fail to act when Canada is threatened? Well, she told Tom Mulcair it's about the demographics of her voters. Mr. Speaker, why does this minister put partisan politics over Canadian national security interests?
There you go. They don't want to split their votes.
Order. The Honourable Minister for Public Security.
Mr. Speaker, our government is deeply concerned about the national security interest of Canadians. That's why we support the law enforcement agencies and the security agencies to do this important work. That's why we rely on their advice to decide when the government, under the Criminal Code of Canada, should list a terrorist entity. Mr. Speaker, good news. These security agencies are constantly reviewing a whole series of organizations to determine if the threshold has been met. I recently talked to them as late as this morning, and I'm very confident that we'll have some important news very quickly.